The email was simple. Anonymous. Just a few lines of text. To whom it may concern. I believe you should know that your newest hire, Ethan Carter, has a history of falsifying credentials, exploiting others for financial gain, and engaging in unethical behavior. I have proof of everything attached below. Perhaps you might reconsider your decision before this becomes a PR disaster. Sincerely, a concerned citizen. I pressed send. I took a deep breath and sat back in my chair, watching as my carefully crafted revenge was set in motion. Ethan Carter had taken 5 years of my life, used me, drained me, and then discarded me like garbage the moment he got what he wanted. But he had underestimated me. He thought I would cry, beg, or drown in heartbreak. Instead, I was about to destroy everything he had built, because I was the one who built it for him in the first place. 5 years of devotion. If someone had told me years ago that I would end up plotting revenge against the man I once loved, I would have laughed in their face. Ethan Carter was my everything. My best friend, my partner, the person I imagined growing old with. When we met in college, he was struggling, not just financially but emotionally. He had dreams bigger than his circumstances, a sharp mind burdened by a lack of opportunity. His family wasn't well off, and unlike most of his classmates, he had to juggle school and part-time jobs just to survive. I, on the other hand, was comfortable. I came from a middle-class background, and while I wasn't rich, I had enough to live without worrying about my next meal. Maybe that's why I felt drawn to Ethan. I wanted to help him, to fix things for him. And oh, how he let me. You're amazing, Ava. I fell hard and fast. Ethan had that underdog charm that made you want to root for him. He was driven, passionate, and so incredibly grateful for my support. I don't deserve you, he used to say, pressing a kiss to my forehead as we lay tangled in bed after a long day. One day when I make it big, I'll give you the world. I believed him. I worked 2 jobs while studying, and yet I always found time to help Ethan. I proofread his essays, helped him apply for internships, and even lent him money when he was short on rent. Just this once, Ava, he would say. I promise I'll pay you back. He never did. But I didn't mind. Because love isn't about keeping score, right? It wasn't just money. It was time, energy, and my own ambitions that I sacrificed for Ethan. While my classmates were building networks and securing internships, I was stuck in his shadow, making sure he succeeded. I remember staying up all night to rewrite his cover letter for an internship that he couldn't even be bothered to draft properly. The next morning he read it, grinned, and said, "Damn, Ava, you should be my secretary." I laughed. He wasn't joking. But the worst part? I didn't mind. I had convinced myself that when Ethan finally made it, we would reap the rewards together. Looking back, there were red flags, big glaring warning signs that I ignored. Like the time he casually mentioned that if he ever had to choose between love and success, he'd choose success. Love fades, Ava. But money, power, those last forever. It was a joke. Or at least I thought it was. Then there was his growing distance. The way he started coming home late, dressing sharper, working out more. The way he would pocket his phone whenever I walked into the room. "It's just work stuff, babe," he'd say, dismissing my concerns with a kiss. I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. Because the alternative? That I had wasted 5 years of my life on a man who was never going to choose me in the end? That was too painful to even consider. The day Ethan left me was just like any other. I woke up, kissed him goodbye, and went to work, completely unaware that when I came home my world would come crashing down. There was no fight. No final argument. Just a letter on the kitchen table. "Ava, I know this is sudden, but I need to be honest. We've grown apart, and I think it's best if we go our separate ways. I've accepted a new job in New York, and I want to focus on myself for now. Please understand that this is for the best. Take care. Ethan." That was it. No thank you for the years I spent building him up. No acknowledgement of the sacrifices I made. Just a cold, calculated exit. Like I was a stepping stone he had finally outgrown. First I was numb. I sat at the kitchen table, rereading his words over and over, trying to make sense of them. Then the reality hit me. He had used me. I thought about the years of my life I had wasted on him. The jobs I turned down to support his ambitions. The vacations I paid for because he couldn't afford them. The thousands of dollars I lent him that he never paid back. And then I snapped. I wasn't going to cry over a man who had never loved me the way I loved him. No. I was going to make sure he regretted the day he ever crossed me. And that's when I started planning my revenge. Once the anger settled in, I stopped thinking about the heartbreak and started looking at the facts. Ethan hadn't just left me, he had used me to climb the ladder of success. And now that he had reached the top, he thought he could just erase me from his story? He had no idea who he was dealing with. I wasn't going to beg for his love. I wasn't going to mourn a man who didn't deserve me. I was going to remind him that his success was never truly his own. Because the truth was simple. Without me, Ethan Carter was nothing. I started with the resume, the one I wrote for him. I still had the original version saved on my laptop. The one I had carefully edited to make him look like the perfect candidate. Ethan had barely done half of the things on that resume. That impressive internship at a top firm? He had only gotten that because I had rewritten his application essay and coached him for the interview. That glowing research paper he published? I wrote half of it. The leadership experience that made him stand out. That was my idea. I had strategically crafted his profile to make him look like a rising star. Ethan hadn't built his career. I had. And now I was about to take it away. Over the next few days I became a detective. I scoured old text messages, emails, and conversations, looking for anything that could be used against him. And what I found was gold. 1. Plagiarized work. Ethan had turned in work that wasn't his more than once. I had proof. 2. Fake credentials. He had exaggerated his experience and skills on applications. 3. Questionable ethics. He once bragged about fudging data during a college finance competition to win. I had the screenshots. With this, I had enough ammunition to end his career before it even started. But I wasn't just going to expose him. I was going to make sure that when his world collapsed, he had nowhere to run. Ethan had just landed a job at Vanguard and Steel, one of the most powerful investment firms in the country. This wasn't just a job, it was the opportunity of a lifetime. And it was all built on lies. I waited until his first month on the job. Just when he had started settling in and impressing his superiors. That's when I sent the first anonymous email. To whom it may concern. I believe you should know that your newest hire, Ethan Carter, has a history of falsifying credentials, exploiting others for financial gain, and engaging in unethical behavior. I have proof of everything attached below. Perhaps you might reconsider your decision before this becomes a PR disaster. Sincerely, a concerned citizen. I attached every shred of evidence I had. Screenshots, emails, old assignments. Everything. And then, I waited. It didn't take long. 2 days later, Ethan's social media went quiet. No posts, no updates, nothing. Then I got a text from him. Ethan, something weird is going on at work. Someone sent an anonymous tip about me. Do you know anything about this? I stared at the message for a long moment before responding. Me, why would I? Ethan, because the email had things only you would know. I smirked. Me, sounds like someone finally caught up with your lies. No response. For the first time in his life, Ethan Carter was powerless. And I was just getting started. I kept close tabs on everything happening. By the end of the week, Vanguard and Steel launched an internal investigation. Ethan's boss started asking questions. His colleagues started whispering. And then, they suspended him. I knew how these firms worked. Vanguard and Steel valued their reputation more than anything. The moment they sensed even a hint of scandal, they would cut him loose. And just like that, the career he had used me to build was on the verge of crumbling. Ethan had made one fatal mistake. He had forgotten who made him. Now he was about to learn the hard way what happens when you betray the person who held you up. And I was going to enjoy every second of his downfall. Ethan Carter's perfect life crumbles. When Ethan left me, he thought he was trading up, leaving behind his old life, his old struggles, and me. But what he didn't realize was that he never built anything on his own. His success was an illusion, and I was the one holding the strings. The moment I cut those strings, his entire world began to collapse. It took less than a week for Vanguard and Steel to act. Ethan had been suspended pending an internal investigation, and on Friday morning he was summoned for a final meeting. I wasn't there, of course, but I could imagine how it went down. A conference room. A panel of senior executives, all staring at him with cold expressions. A folder of evidence sitting on the table. And Ethan, sweating, panicking, watching his dream slip through his fingers. Mr. Carter, we've reviewed the allegations against you. Your resume contains multiple discrepancies, and there's documented evidence of academic dishonesty. Do you have anything to say for yourself? What could he say? Lie? Deny it? None of it would work. His own emails, messages, and past work had already exposed him. And by the time the meeting ended, Ethan was no longer an employee of Vanguard and Steel. He was officially blacklisted from one of the biggest firms in the industry. That evening my phone rang. Ethan's name flashed across the screen. I let it go to voicemail. Then another call. And another. By the fourth I answered. "What do you want, Ethan?" I said, keeping my voice calm. "You did this." His voice was shaking with rage. "You ruined me." I laughed. "You ruined yourself." "You think this is funny?" he snapped. "I lost my job. Do you have any idea what you've done?" "Oh, I know exactly what I did." "You're a psychopath, Ava." "No, Ethan," I said coldly. "I'm just someone who finally realized I was done being your stepping stone." I could hear his breathing, fast, uneven. He wasn't used to losing. "I swear to God, Ava, you'll regret this." "No, Ethan." I smiled. "You're the only one with regrets." And then I hung up. Ethan had always been charming, the kind of guy who could talk his way into anything. But charm only worked when you had something to offer. And now that he had nothing, his so-called friends started disappearing. I watched it unfold online. His LinkedIn. Silent. His usual Friday night crew at expensive bars? Gone. Even his new lifestyle friends, the ones he left me for, were suddenly too busy to reply to his texts. Without his fancy job and promising future, he was just another unemployed man with a ruined reputation. And in his world, that was social death. Investment firms talk. Recruiters talk. And once word got out that Ethan had been fired for fraud, every door slammed shut. I made sure of it. Another anonymous email, this time to every major firm in the city. "Dear hiring manager, I believe you should be aware of a candidate named Ethan Carter. He was recently terminated from Vanguard and Steel due to fraudulent credentials and unethical practices. Attached is the documentation proving his past misconduct. I'd advise caution before bringing someone like him into your company." And just like that, Ethan Carter became unemployable. A month after his firing, Ethan moved out of his high-rise apartment. Couldn't afford it anymore. He tried freelancing, but no one wanted to work with a disgraced finance bro. Then he tried reaching out to old connections, professors, colleagues, even old bosses. But bridges once burned don't get rebuilt. Desperation made him reckless. One night I got another text from him. "Ethan, let's talk. Please." I left him on read. Because for the first time in years I owed him nothing. And it felt damn good. Ethan thought he could erase me from his life and move on. He thought he could leave behind the woman who built him, as if I were some forgettable phase of his journey. But life doesn't work that way. People like Ethan, they believe they're untouchable. That they can step on others and never face consequences. But when you betray the person who gave you everything, sometimes they take everything back. And I did. Ethan was officially ruined, but I wasn't done yet. I had taken away his job, his reputation, and his social circle. But there was one thing left. His future. He thought he could simply start over in another city, rebuild his life with a fresh identity, and pretend none of this had ever happened. But I wasn't going to let him. Because after everything he put me through, Ethan Carter didn't get to walk away clean. Ethan tried applying for jobs outside the city, hoping to escape his tarnished name. He must have sent dozens of applications, hoping some firm, any firm, would overlook his past. And at first it looked like he had found something. A small finance startup in Chicago showed interest in hiring him. It wasn't Vanguard and Steel, but it was a new beginning. One that he was desperate for. Too bad for him, I was one step ahead. Before he could get the job, I sent one last email. To the hiring manager. "I noticed that your firm is considering hiring Ethan Carter. You may want to reconsider. He was previously fired from Vanguard and Steel for falsifying credentials and unethical practices. If you need proof, see the attached documents. Sincerely, a concerned party." The next day, the job offer was revoked. And Ethan? Back to square one. One night I got a call from a mutual friend. "Have you seen Ethan lately?" she asked. "No." "Why?" I replied. "He's not doing well." I wasn't surprised. Ethan had always been confident, cocky, untouchable. But that was only because his life had never truly fallen apart before. Now he had nothing. No job. No income. No future. And without his career, He wasn't the golden boy anymore. He was just another man who lost everything. A few weeks later I got a text. Ethan, Ava, can we talk? I ignored it. Then another. Ethan, please. I need to talk to you. This time I replied. What do you want, Ethan? I'm sorry. It was almost funny. Now that his life was ruined, he suddenly found the ability to apologize. I let him wait for a long time before responding. I don't need your apology, Ethan. I needed it before you threw me away. No reply. Because what else could he say? He knew he had destroyed the one person who had truly been on his side. And now he was the one left with nothing. I expected to feel guilt. Or maybe regret. But I felt nothing but satisfaction. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't the woman supporting someone else's dreams. I was finally the woman building my own future. And Ethan Carter? He was nothing more than a cautionary tale. A reminder that you don't get to use people and walk away unscathed. Some people, they fight back. And I did. For years my life had been about Ethan. Supporting him. Encouraging him. Sacrificing for him. But now he was nothing but a ghost in my past. And for the first time in a long time I could breathe. There was no more resentment weighing me down. No more waiting for him to acknowledge my worth. Because I had done something he never saw coming, I took back my power. And it felt damn good. With Ethan gone, I finally had time to focus on me. I wasn't just his ex-girlfriend or the woman he used and left behind. I was Ava Reynolds. Someone with ambitions of her own. So I made a decision. I was going to build my own success. Not as an extension of someone else but on my own terms. I started networking, updating my resume and applying for better opportunities. Within a month, I landed a better job than Ethan ever had. It was poetic, really. While he was drowning in his failures, I was thriving. One evening, I was at a networking event, sipping on a glass of wine and talking to some potential business connections. That's when I saw him. Ethan. He looked nothing like the man I once knew. Gone was the expensive suit and cocky smirk. He looked tired, defeated, lost. And when he saw me, his face fell. He didn't approach me. He didn't even try. Because he knew. He had already lost. And I smiled, turned away and went back to my conversation, because Ethan Carter was no longer worth my time. Loving someone shouldn't mean losing yourself. And sometimes, the best revenge isn't about destroying someone else. It's about winning without them. I had done what Ethan never expected. I moved on. I became successful. And most importantly, I proved that I never needed him to succeed. He needed me. And without me, he was nothing. Ethan Carter was just a chapter in my story. And as I walked out of that event, leaving him behind for good, I knew one thing for certain. I was finally free. And my real life, it was just beginning. For years, my identity had been tied to Ethan Carter. I was his supporter, his provider, his stepping stone. But now, I was simply Ava Reynolds. And I was thriving. With my new job, new confidence, and new purpose, I no longer cared about the past. Ethan was nothing more than a lesson learned. But what I didn't realize, my story wasn't over yet. One afternoon, I was out with my best friend, Tasha, when she brought up a name I hadn't heard in weeks. So, guess who I ran into yesterday, she said, stirring her iced coffee with a smirk. I raised a brow. Who? Ethan's old friend, Jason. And guess what? Your ex is officially unemployed and blacklisted from every major firm in the city. I wasn't surprised. He did it to himself, I said, shrugging. Tasha grinned. Oh, I know. But apparently he's also blaming you. Says you ruined his life. I laughed. He ruined his own life the moment he decided I was disposable. But deep down, I knew this wasn't the last I'd hear of Ethan Carter. Because men like him, they don't handle failure well. That evening as I settled into my apartment, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Unknown, you think you've won? You have no idea what's coming. I stared at the screen, a slow smirk forming. Ethan. I had been waiting for this. Because if he thought I would be scared of his empty threats, he was about to learn just how much he had underestimated me. I refused to be a victim in his story. Ethan Carter may have thought he could intimidate me. But I had already won. And if he wanted to make this a war, I had plenty of fight left in me. Because while he was still mourning his failures, I was already moving forward. And there was nothing he could do to stop me. It was a cool, sleepless night when my phone vibrated with an unfamiliar email notification. I sat up in bed, heart thumping as I opened it. The subject line simply read, "We need to talk." Inside was a brief message. "Ava, the truth is far more tangled than you realize. There are pieces of the puzzle missing, secrets that could unravel everything you've built. Meet me tomorrow night at the Crossroads Cafe. Come alone." I stared at the screen, a mix of curiosity and trepidation washing over me. Had someone discovered my role in Ethan's downfall? Or was this another twist in a story I thought was finished? Despite my hard-earned success, a cold knot of anxiety formed in my stomach. The next evening I steeled myself and headed to the small, dimly lit cafe on the edge of the city. Inside the Crossroads Cafe, I found a solitary figure in the corner, a man with graying hair and cautious eyes. He looked up as I approached, his gaze both intense and weary. "Are you Ava Reynolds?" he asked quietly. I nodded. "Who are you?" He introduced himself simply as Marcus. "I have information that you'll want to hear. It concerns Ethan, and something else, your own story." My pulse quickened. "Go on," I urged, sliding into the seat opposite him. Marcus leaned forward, lowering his voice. "What you did to Ethan was calculated and precise. I won't deny that it ruined his career. But there's more. Ethan wasn't working alone. He was involved with a network that manipulated credentials, falsified histories, and preyed on the ambitions of vulnerable people. You unknowingly became entangled in that web." I frowned. "What are you saying? That I helped him build his resume?" "No," Marcus replied, shaking his head. "You built him up. But while you were busy propping him up, someone else was watching. I've been following his trail ever since I began investigating corporate fraud. When you sent that email, it wasn't the end, it was the spark that set off a chain reaction. And now, as the dust settles, I need to warn you, there are powerful people behind Ethan's scheme who don't take kindly to loose ends." Marcus produced a small envelope from his coat and slid it across the table. Inside were printouts of internal memos, obscure emails, and a scanned image of a contract linking Ethan to a shadowy group of financiers. I scanned the documents, feeling a chill as I realized that the network's reach was far wider than I'd imagined. "These documents, they show that Ethan was merely a front man," I whispered. "He was following orders, not acting on his own." "Exactly," Marcus said. "Your actions, while justified in your mind, have inadvertently become part of a much larger picture. The anonymous emails you sent were only the beginning. Now those behind this network will be looking for every piece of the puzzle. And you, Ava, have one too many secrets tied to them." My mind raced. I had spent years meticulously dismantling Ethan's fabricated life, believing I was reclaiming my power. But now it seemed that in the process of exacting revenge, I had also stepped into a dangerous arena, one with unseen players who might not care about the past or my pain. I looked up, meeting Marcus's steady gaze. "What do you want from me?" "Help me expose the entire network," he said firmly. "I have contacts, resources, and a plan to bring down these people once and for all. But I can't do it alone. You have unique access. Evidence from the early days of Ethan's rise, the correspondence between you two, things that could prove their involvement. Together we can dismantle their operation." I hesitated, remembering the countless sleepless nights, the bitter taste of betrayal, and the satisfaction of seeing Ethan's empire crumble. Yet the thought of being pulled into something far more dangerous gave me pause. "And if I say no?" Marcus's eyes hardened. "Then you risk being silenced. They have a way of cleaning up loose ends, Ava. I'm giving you a choice. Either stand with me and protect what little freedom you have left, or be swept away by forces far more ruthless than a disgraced ex-boyfriend." That night, as I walked back to my apartment under the city's flickering streetlights, Marcus's words echoed in my mind. Every memory of Ethan, his charming promises, his empty reassurances, the betrayal that shattered my world, mixed with the realization that I was now facing an enemy I hadn't even known existed. The satisfaction I'd felt in my revenge had begun to sour. The power I once craved now came with a heavy burden, the weight of a secret far larger than any personal vendetta. And in that moment, I understood that my battle wasn't just against one man, it was against an entire network built on deceit, greed, and the exploitation of trust. I knew I had to make a decision, and soon. The past was no longer something I could simply bury and move on from. It had re-emerged as a threat, intertwining with my present and casting long shadows over my future. I spent the next few days in quiet contemplation, poring over the documents Marcus had given me. Late into the nights, I debated the risks and the moral implications. Was I ready to become a whistleblower, to risk everything for a cause I'd never sought out? Or would I continue to live in the comfort of my hard-won freedom, ignoring the darker undercurrents that now threatened to pull me back into a dangerous game? As the morning light crept through my window one day, I made my choice. I would join Marcus. I would expose the entire network not just for my own protection but to prevent others from being manipulated and betrayed as I had been. The fight ahead was daunting and I knew there was no turning back. With a deep breath, I dialed Marcus's number. "I'm in," I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. "Let's bring them down." The morning after my call with Marcus, I sat in my apartment, staring at the evidence in front of me. Documents, emails, financial records. Pieces of a puzzle that stretched far beyond my personal revenge against Ethan. This wasn't just about him anymore. I had thought I was dismantling one man's career. But instead I had poked a beast. A network of fraud and corruption that spanned far beyond what I imagined. No. I was in the middle of it. We met in a secluded cafe on the outskirts of the city. This time Marcus wasn't alone. A woman sat beside him, her sharp gaze assessing me before offering a small nod. "This is Valerie," Marcus said. "She's an investigative journalist. If we're going to expose this, she's our best shot at making sure it doesn't get buried." I shook her hand. "So you believe this story has weight?" Valerie leaned forward. "Ava, this isn't just a story. It's a scandal waiting to explode. Ethan was a pawn and so were you. The question is, are you ready for what comes next?" I hesitated. The thought of my name being attached to something like this sent a shiver down my spine. But then I thought of the years I spent sacrificing for Ethan, the way he used me and tossed me aside like I was disposable. No, I wasn't disposable. And I wasn't about to back down. "I'm in," I said. The first sign that the people behind Ethan knew I was digging came 3 days later. I woke up to find my apartment broken into. Nothing was stolen, but drawers were rummaged through, my laptop was turned on, and a single note was left on my kitchen counter. "Stop now." My blood ran cold. I wasn't dealing with petty criminals. Whoever these people were, they wanted me scared. They wanted me to know they were watching. Marcus and Valerie took one look at the note and knew what it meant. "We don't stop," Valerie said firmly. "We push harder." Over the next few weeks, we gathered more information. Marcus had contacts in law enforcement who suspected this network had been laundering money through fake job placements, using unsuspecting professionals as cover. Ethan? He had been their perfect tool. A man desperate to rise, willing to cut corners to get there. Me. I had unknowingly helped build his credibility, giving him the resources and support he needed to become their pawn. Now those same people saw me as a threat. And threats. They had a way of disappearing. One night as I was reviewing evidence with Marcus and Valerie, my phone buzzed. An unknown number. I hesitated before answering. "Ava." The voice was unmistakable. "Ethan." I exhaled sharply. "You have some nerve calling me." "I know," he said, his voice shaky. "But I need your help." I let out a bitter laugh. "You need my help? After everything?" "Ava, please." He was desperate now. A far cry from the arrogant man who had walked away from me. "You don't understand. They think I gave you something. They think you know things I don't. They're watching me too." I paused. If Ethan was scared, that meant things were worse than I thought. "What do they want?" I asked. "To shut you up," he whispered. "And if they can't do that, they'll make sure you disappear." A chill ran down my spine. I looked at Marcus and Valerie. "They're coming for me." Valerie nodded. "Then it's time to strike first." We had everything we needed. The proof of fraudulent activity, the names of the people pulling the strings, and a man on the inside who was now desperate to save himself. We leaked the story. Valerie put together a bombshell report, dropping names, financial records, and exposing how this network had been controlling careers and blackmailing professionals. The moment the article went live, it was chaos. Within 24 hours, investigations were launched. Major firms cut ties with the people involved. Ethan's old employers? Shut down. The authorities issued arrests. And Ethan? He tried to run. But the moment he stepped out of hiding, he was taken in for questioning. His dream life, the one he abandoned me for, was officially over. A week later, as I sat on my balcony watching the city lights, my phone buzzed. It was Ethan. This time it was a video call. I let it ring. I had nothing left to say to him. He had taken enough of my time, my energy, my kindness. No. I was free. I blocked the number and set my phone down. And this time, it was mine alone. The fallout from the exposé rocked the industry. It was everywhere. News outlets, social media, even late-night talk shows. What started as a personal betrayal had unraveled into a national scandal. Companies rushed to issue statements, distancing themselves from the corruption. Some executives resigned in disgrace, while others were arrested outright. The firm that had hired Ethan? Completely dismantled. And Ethan himself? The golden boy had fallen. With his name tied to the scandal, Ethan had no future left in his field. His dream career was gone before it even started. He tried to play the victim, claiming he had no idea what he had gotten involved in. But the emails, the financial records, the truth was undeniable. He had benefited from the corruption, even if he hadn't orchestrated it. The authorities didn't arrest him, but they blacklisted him. No company would touch him now. His luxury apartment? Gone. His new lifestyle? Over. His connections? Vanished. For the first time in years, Ethan was powerless. And I had nothing left to fear from him. With Ethan out of the picture, I expected to feel satisfied. And I did. But I also felt something else. Relief. For so long, my life had revolved around him, his dreams, his ambitions, his success. Now for the first time, I was free to focus on me. I took time to reflect. To heal. I started therapy, rebuilding the confidence I had lost in my years with Ethan. I reconnected with friends, traveled, and for the first time in a long time, I let myself dream about my own future. A future where I didn't have to dim my light for someone else to shine. Months later, as I was sipping coffee on a quiet afternoon, an email popped up on my phone. It was from Valerie. "Ava, you might want to see this." Attached was a job offer. A major investigative firm wanted me on their team. My background in business, my ability to uncover deception, it was exactly what they needed. And just like that, the skills I once used to build Ethan's future were now building mine. One evening, while scrolling through social media, I stumbled across a photo of Ethan. He looked different. The arrogance was gone. The confidence had faded. He was working a dead-end job, a far cry from the life he had imagined for himself. I could have smiled. I could have felt triumphant. But instead, I simply closed my phone. Ethan no longer mattered. His punishment wasn't what I had done to him. His punishment was knowing that he had everything he ever wanted, and lost it all because he thought I was disposable. I had moved on. And that was the greatest victory of all.